Welcome to the podcast. Can you please introduce yourself to the listeners?
Yeah, I'm Nazanin Noor, and I'm an actor and a writer based out of Los Angeles.
What could you tell us about the current situation on the ground?
In Iran, we're on day 13 of protests that have started after the killing of Mahsa Amini. So she was a 22-year-old Iranian Kurdish woman. She was visiting the capital of Iran, Tehran, with her brother and her family. And we actually just got new reports, like literally about an hour ago. A journalist broke the story of just getting new details about what actually transpired. So apparently, as it's been reported that she got off the train, was immediately stopped by the morality police. There's a thing in Iran called the Gashta Ershad, and it's like AKA the morality police. And basically they kind of roam the streets and they check for women's clothing to be proper, making sure, somebody's not holding hands or, in public. And it kind of, just a little backstory on that is it kind of depends on who's in power at that moment, as far as who the president is or how tightly they want to crack down from the government. And just also for people that don't know, Iran turned into a theocracy after 1979. There was an Islamic revolution led by the Ayatollah Khomeini. And, there's a lot of information to know before that, but that's, I feel like, for another time. But it was a monarchy before 1979. And then when this Ayatollah came in, there was a revolution. It changed to an Islamic republic. And then that's when these rules and these morality police and all this stuff kind of came about, is after 1979. So she was stopped by the morality police. She was apparently stopped for her pants being too tight. At first, we were told it was improper hijab, and hijab is the headscarf that women have to wear in Iran, and it's compulsory in Iran. And that's one of the things they're fighting for, is to make it a choice. It should be a woman's choice how to dress. It shouldn't be something that's forced upon them. According to this new report, she was stopped for her tight pants. She was like screaming and begging them not to take her. Her brother was trying to defend her as well. It's really scary. Every woman in Iran has had a brush with the morality police, myself included. I didn't grow up there, but I visited, so I have had a brush with them myself. They were begging not to be taken away because you never know what can happen when you're in custody. People get jailed, people get beaten. And she was taken. She was reportedly dealt many blows to her head. Her head was banged against the inside of this van that they were put in, because there were other women in this van, and these are their eyewitness accounts. She was taken to what's called a re-education center. So the only analogy I can give to Americans is when you get a drunk driving ticket and you have to go take that class from the DMV so that you can get your license back or whatever it is. It's kind of like that, but it's supposed to be for, your morality and whatever they've come up with. And then there's CCTV footage that showed her inside of this center. She collapsed. She was taken to the hospital. She fell into a coma and she died 2 days later. So her CT scan was leaked from the hospital, and it showed multiple blows to her head, and that she most likely died of a hemorrhage because of blows to the head. The government tried to say that, well, she had a heart attack in custody, which is already very difficult to believe. A 22-year-old woman who has no prior underlying health conditions just has a heart attack. So, everybody already knew from the beginning, well, that's not what happened. Her family wasn't allowed to see her. And her family was not allowed to look at her body either. And apparently they asked a lot of questions of the doctors while they were in there, and the doctors would not answer their questions either regarding what happened. And these are all new reports that just came out last night and this morning too that I saw. There's an activist named Mahsa Amini. She's the most prominent vocal activist, feminist activist for Iranians and Iranian women. And she got in touch with Mahsa's sister and sent her a photo that someone from the hospital sent her. That's how they got to see the body, was somebody from America sent her a picture that, it was very convoluted. And that once that news broke, people started taking to the streets. And I refer to it as a powder keg moment, because it's not just about her death. It's what it means for Iranian women and the oppression that they've lived under for 43 years, as well as the oppression the entire nation has lived under for 43 years. So it was just a culmination of all these events.
Similar to George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. So tell me, what was the building powder keg that exploded?
I'm glad you brought up the George Floyd protest, because that's exactly how I described it as well, was, George Floyd's murder at the hands of the police here, and us subsequently going out to the streets and protesting. We were protesting not just for him, but to end systemic racism, to bring awareness of systemic racism in America and police brutality. So it wasn't just about George Floyd. It was George Floyd and all the other George Floyds and all the other issues that came about because of that. So this was the same thing that happened with Mahsa. So some underlying issues are the economy hasn't been handled well in Iran. The unemployment rate is super high. There's a huge disparity between the rich and the poor. There's almost like no middle class anymore. So it's just like a really big disparity. People don't want to live under these archaic rules and draconian laws. There were uprisings that happened over the last few years. The big ones that I can tell you about from immediate memory, just a few months ago, Iran faced a water shortage crisis, and there were also mass protests. Big rivers, famous rivers, are drying up and have dried up. And it's due to government mismanagement of funds. And so people are hungry. People don't have water in certain areas. And so that's what caused these protests that happened a few months ago. We had a big one in 2019. It's referred to as Aban, Bloody Aban, which Aban Ma is the month of November. And so it happened in November 2019. There was another uprising, mostly sparked by the economic disparities and a rise in gas prices. So there was a big hike in fuel prices during that time too. And, everybody's just kind of like, why, where are we supposed to get the money to pay for this? And so that was the spark. Again, it's not just about a hike in fuel prices, but that was the spark for those. And a lot of people took to the streets. I mean, it was huge. And they ended up killing 1,500 protesters that we know of, 1,500 protesters that we know of. They did the exact same thing they're doing now. They use the exact same playbook where they shut down the internet service. They make it really difficult to even be able to use VPNs to bypass all of that. So the information flow coming out slows down. So they don't want people to see what they're doing to their people. And there have been, thousands, tens of thousands of videos that have come out in the last 12 days that we're all constantly resharing, showing what the police are doing, they're shooting. I mean, there's video of people getting shot on the sidewalk for protesting, like in plain sight of everybody. That's how much I feel like they're emboldened, because they know that they've killed with impunity before and they can continue to do so. So that's what we're seeing now. And just as of yesterday, a lot of journalists are reporting, and I'm noticing myself, that we're not seeing as many videos in the last 24 hours. So they've really cracked down on the internet. And, the overwhelming majority of Iranians in the diaspora have family and friends in Iran. So we are in contact with people. We do get information. We are seeing things. And even that has slowed down in the last 24 hours, which is very concerning, because when Iran shuts down the internet, it's never because anything good is going to happen, the government of Iran.
Wow. The bravery and the courage to take to the streets. I mean, that was my impression, that to protest a government with this much power is putting your life on the line, and then for the rest of your life, because if they document or think you were part of the protest, you could be labeled as an enemy of the state. Absolutely. Forever, and you and your whole family, I'm guessing, can be punished.
That's what's happening to Mahsa Amini's family. The report that I read from this morning with the updated information on what happened to her stated that the government officials have contacted the family, and this is a playbook. Like, this happens all the time. And they told the family, do not speak out about this publicly. So nobody can get anyone, any journalist, anyone that's trying to contact the family of Mahsa Amini cannot get through to them. They're not answering the phone. So they've instilled so much fear in the people to even just speak out about their basic emotions and their human rights regarding the issue. And they don't even allow families to grieve properly. Sometimes they've broken up funerals for figures like this, because we had a famous wrestler, Navid Afkari, who was executed about 2 years ago, I believe it was. They accused him of participating in protests in 2018 and accused him of a crime. He's always claimed his innocence, and there was very insufficient evidence to back the claim anyway. So it was like trumped up charges, and it was like almost like, yeah, they were making an example of, okay, you're an athlete and you have a voice and people like you. And if you're going to go act out against the government, we're going to make an example of you. And they did the same thing to his family as well. So this is their playbook. And when you mention bravery, it cannot be overstated how brave the women who are at the forefront of all this and the young people in Iran are at the forefront of all this and what they're putting on the line. They're literally in the streets screaming death to the dictator, death to the regime. That carries the death penalty with it. Like, you can get in serious trouble for that. And they're taking off their headscarves and walking through the streets. There's plenty of film of that. Some of them have been stopped and beaten on camera, but the things that they're doing are things that we haven't seen before. It's a different moment. It's a huge moment. It just can't be overstated enough.
Yeah, when I think about me and my cushy American life, I have a hard time thinking of anything even close to me that would resemble this situation and this bravery, right?
Right.
And the only thing I can think of is it would go back to like the American Revolution or something where you would stand up against this powerful government and it's so bad that you're willing to die for the cause.
There really is no equivalent, and that's one argument that I've made for sure. Some others have made, and I understand the need because it is a feminist movement too happening specifically with the women wanting to remove their headscarves and having it be a choice. It shouldn't be forced. They just want the choice. Nobody's saying that, oh, we don't want religion. Like nobody can be religious or practice their religion. It's like, yeah, you should practice yours and I'm going to do what I want to do. That's all they want. They want a secular country. But people have tried to compare it to the feminist movement in America, which I totally understand why people want to do that. And they're trying to tie it to something that they understand, with my body, my choice. But it's just different because in America, I can walk down the street in this outfit and my hair out, and there's no chance of me getting arrested, beaten, or murdered for that. And in Iran, there is. In Iran, when you get divorced, the man has all the rights. If you have a child, custody automatically goes to him. It's very difficult. Women can't sing in public alone. You have to be in a group, and there's just so many things where women are not considered equal to men. And so that's just not how it is here. And I just feel like the focus needs to be on the actual issues in Iran and what the women there are facing.
Does it feel like they're not fully understanding what's happening?
I think most Americans, I think they're having, I think a lot of people that I've seen, and I'm so pleasantly surprised, first of all, that people are caring this much now, because one of the main things Iranians have always felt, not just in Iran, but in the diaspora, is when our people and our country are going through something really big, it doesn't get as much coverage in the media. People don't care as much. There's not people like celebrities and nobody's posting about it and trying to raise awareness. This is the first time that we've seen so many big name people with big platforms that are actually sharing information and amplifying Iranian voices. So I think that's been wonderful to see, and I'm so thankful for that, and to all the people that have been doing it and continue to do it. I think there are some people that just because of maybe not knowing as much and wanting to connect to it might use their own personal connection of, oh yeah, that's like abortion here, which is, I understand, and I think it's fine if that's how you connect to it, and if you're still raising awareness, great. But please understand that it's still vastly different for the women of Iran, and to center the conversation on what they're going through and make it less about what we go through here in America and what they go through there in Iran, because there is no comparison.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It sounds like it's about a lot of issues that the movement would like to change: feminism, freedom of religion, freedom of dress, freedom to sing by yourself in public, all the various different laws, which I'm going to guess and say that it's a system that is trying to oppress. I'm just thinking, like, why would you make a rule that women couldn't sing by themselves in public? It's just, or that they have to dress in a certain way. It's just a system of power. It's like, we will control all these aspects of your life so that you will be silent, so that you will know that you have no political power. You're lesser than, and we'll make sure that that's signaled in a variety of ways.
Absolutely.
Well, on that topic, what are they threatened by? What are they worried about? What are they worried that's going to happen?
I feel like they're worried that their regime is going to get toppled. I feel like they're worried about, or every time these uprisings happen, it's this little taste of, oh, is this going to be when it changes? Is this going to be the revolution, the next revolution? And I think that they're scared of the power of the people. The youth in Iran are, I believe, I'm trying to get the number right, but it's somewhere around 70% of Iran's population is under 25, under 30 or 25. And so we have, that's a lot of these Gen Z kids in Iran. They have only known oppression. They only grew up under the Islamic Republic, and they have so much access to the outside world through social media and everything else. You got to imagine putting yourself in their shoes. They're looking at all this freedom around the world, and they're like, why do we have to live this way? I don't want to do this. And you see a lot of videos of these young kids. I think I also read that the average age of the protesters that are getting murdered by government forces are between 18 and 21 years old. So it's our youth are getting killed. Our youth are getting slaughtered. And they're brave. They're the brave ones that are going out there. All we can do from here is amplify their voices. It's nowhere near what they're doing over there. They're actually on the front lines, literally putting their lives on the line. That's why it's been so vital to have so many people, so many people with big names and big platforms that have been resharing the Iran stories, the stories coming out of Iran, is because the people of Iran have always felt like the world doesn't care about them and their plight. And now that seeing these people post for them, that they know their names, they know Dua Lipa, they know Youngblood, they know all these big name people that are, posted, Justin Bieber, Kim Kardashian, everyone's raising awareness about it, which I think is fantastic. And I was very surprised, actually, pleasantly, but I was surprised about how far the reach has gone. And that's motivating for people in Iran to see, okay, people care. This isn't going to die down. Maybe we should keep going. We should keep going because we have people behind us. Mm-hmm. And that's even how we feel here in the diaspora. Like, oh, people are starting to finally care. Mm-hmm. This is great. I think everyone's just trying to keep each other motivated to whatever we can do here on the ground to support them, to make them see you have all this support. We're behind you, I think is crucial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, not to center the United States in this, but just a side note, similarly with George Floyd, I felt the same way. I remember the day of the initial event and protest, maybe the 48 hours, I was like, well, this will pass. And then it just kept going and going and going. And I was thinking, wait, are we actually doing this now, people? Are we actually going to make this happen?
Yeah.
So what percentage do you estimate of Iranians are behind the protest?
I really feel like that's difficult for me to say. I don't think I have enough information to speak on that topic. But if you look at the amount of people that are on the streets and the amount of people, the chatter on social media, the hashtag, Mahsa Amini's hashtag, and the Iran protests have garnered over 120 million tweets since this whole thing started. And so the power of that and the social media, it just shows how things are different this time. And it shows how much it does help actually to raise awareness. I always said it kind of feels, I know it might feel to people like, oh, well, am I really doing anything? I'm just posting this for you. And I would tell my friends in the last couple of weeks that are not Iranian, it does matter. Because the media pays attention to what's trending. The media pays attention to who's talking about what. And that's how we'll get coverage. So it's crucial. Mm-hmm. I feel like the fact that that hashtag has been used over 120 million times is evidence of what the people of Iran want. Of course, there's going to be people in any country that don't want something. It's never going to be 100% of people agree on something. But I would say the overwhelming majority or the majority of Iranians, they don't want to live under a theocracy anymore. They want their basic freedoms and rights. They want to live in a democratically elected country to elect their officials democratically. I don't believe in foreign intervention or military intervention, and most Iranians don't want that either. It needs to come from the people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of my best friends growing up, and actually I started the podcast with her. She's Iranian. She was born in the States, but her father emigrated in the late 60s, I believe. And from what I understand, was leaving because of political issues that were, I guess, maybe building throughout the late 60s, early 70s.
Right.
I asked her what her father is feeling about it and currently, and he's sad mainly about the violence. Correct me if I'm wrong, people in Iran or more conservative individuals might believe that this is like a Western degradation of culture, perhaps.
Well, here's the thing, too, with Iranians. You mentioned your friend's father coming over in the 60s and that there was some upheaval. So there was a very well-documented coup that happened in Iran in 1953. The American and the British were behind it. So, there's declassified documents from the CIA that showed that it's very well documented. You can look it up. So starting from there, sure, there was a lot of things that happened that led to us getting to 1979. And with that, because Iranians know that outside forces have meddled in their country's affairs before, it makes it easy for the Islamic Republic to try to spin that narrative to the people now. Like these are Western forces coming in here and riling people up, and these aren't even Iran. These are like people sent here and spies, and they kind of try to make it seem like it's the U.S. and outside forces and Israel that are drumming this up. There's no issue here. Everything's fine, and so there are Iranians that will believe that, and also that fault because they support the Islamic Republic and they have this memory of like, oh, well, the US and the British did this back then. I'm sure they're behind it now. Something like that,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It sounds like the movement is the feminist elements, also government mismanagement of resources, lack of water, lack of food, you were saying.
It's also, there's so much hypocrisy under these government officials. There's Iranian government officials who, crack down on their own citizens and make life difficult for them financially, through mismanagement, through archaic laws, through a theocracy. And a lot of them send their own children abroad to study and live. There are Iranian regime officials and people tied to them whose families live and kids live like in LA, in New York, in London. And, people document these things. People have posted pictures of them in their social media accounts. And it's so infuriating and makes me livid, as it does to other Iranians too, because of the hypocrisy. This young woman, Mahsa Amini, was murdered for what we now know is tight jeans and possibly for some hair showing from her hair under her headscarf. And it was deemed improper. And then you have your own sons and daughters that we've now seen on TikTok and Instagram flaunting their, body, which I have no problem with flaunting your body, flaunt it all day. But it's the hypocrisy that bothers me, is why is your daughter allowed to do this? And these poor people's daughters are getting jailed and beaten and killed for wanting to live the way yours are out abroad. And if you've created such a wonderful country for your people, why are you sending your kids outside of it? And lastly, if America and England and all these places are the devil, why are your kids living in those countries? It's infuriating.
And you mentioned this earlier, and it seems like the only answer, which is power. They believe or know or have learned through experience that the system of power that is on the surface keeps them in power. And if they don't keep doing that, then they lose power and money and influence and privilege.
Mm-hmm.
But they logically conclude what a lot of people do, particularly the protesters right now, that this system isn't humane. It's not good for the people. Thus, it's not good for their children. Thus, they don't want their own children living in that regime. That would be very infuriating. Yeah.
And I believe that, because you had asked earlier what they're scared of, I really believe that they are clinging to this issue of compulsory hijab because it is a form of control and control over women specifically. And I just believe women are stronger than men. I do feel that in what we fight in mentally, just all the things that women have had to go through over the years and that we overcome, and we still do what we got to do. I just feel like they're scared of the power of women and the power of women in numbers. And also, if they lose control of the compulsory hijab issue, they know that the regime will slowly crumble. Because once they say, okay, then we're going to take this off, then it's like, okay, well, now I'm going to come out like this too. Okay, and now I don't want to be unequal to men when it comes to this or that. And it's going to keep fighting and fighting. And eventually this structure crumbles. So I feel like they're really, beating women in the street, shooting women in the street for their headscarves, because they know if they lose that one issue, everything else will start crumbling after it. So they have to cling to that.
Yeah. It's just so sad, and it's completely naive for me to say this, but I always think about situations like this and think like you could probably stay in power if you just adjust. Like you don't have to, we don't necessarily need you to not be in power. Just listen, just change these rules. But they hold to the line so strongly that in some ways they almost guarantee their downfall because they're so rigid to everything.
And to say that though, I do have to interject that people don't want them to stay.
Well, obviously, because they're completely not of the people. They're not interested in listening or caring, and the lengths they will go to irrationally, delusionally control other people, murder people on the streets. Yeah. It's criminal. It's psychopathic.
And I said that too, because there are people that have made the argument of, if they would just reform, we need reformists. And it's like, there's no reforming this regime. There is no, okay, we'll let you take that off, but everything else stands. It's still repressive and oppressive. And so, people in the streets, they're not yelling, they're not saying we want reform. They're saying down with the dictator, death to the dictator, death to the regime. There is no, we want reform.
What do you predict will happen?
It's really hard to say because I think as an Iranian you have this cautious optimism, but you also have this pessimism about the situation because just in my own lifetime I have watched multiple protests and movements like this. I actually was in Iran in 2009 when the Green Movement was going on. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but there was elections in 2009. It was when Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was elected president. His opposition candidate was Mir Hossein Mousavi, so he was supposed to be the reformer, and the color green was associated with the reformist campaign. So that they called it the Green Movement. Everybody was wearing green for that. I witnessed the subsequent uprising and people being angered about their vote being stolen because they knew the elections were rigged. They counted something apparently like 6 million votes within like 10 minutes and we're like, yeah, he won, basically. It was just these crazy things. And we were watching on the news and we all knew, like, this isn't correct, obviously. So people poured out into the streets and then there was she became like the face of the Green Movement uprising was Neda Agha Sultan, who was out in the streets during one of these protests and a sniper shot her here and she bled out on camera. It's all on camera. And so she became the face of that struggle. Nothing changed after that, like they got crushed again. It wasn't covered for long enough in the media. People moved on and the government got to do what it got to do. And then we saw it happen again. Like I said, 2005, it happened 2009, 2018, 2019, and now we're here in 2022. Again, I do feel like it feels different right now. There's a groundswell. There's a lot of young people out there. Women are leading the charge. The world is watching now more and more. So who knows what could happen? I really don't think I can predict. I hope for change. I hope for change.
What do you think would be necessary for change exactly? That they actually, by force, overthrow the government?
I think if there's an overthrowing of anything, it has to be done by the people. So, yes.
Meaning that they would raid the government buildings or actually go head to head with the military?
I think what needs to happen is that to really be successful is that there needs to be members of government, members of the military, members of the police force that will actually turn and be on the side of the people.
Yeah.
That's what I think needs to happen. So until that happens, it's difficult.
We've seen that happen in other movements like this for sure. Yeah. Is there a leader in the protest or a set of leaders?
That I'm aware of. There's no person that everyone's like, this is the person that should come back. I don't believe in any one person right now. I'm not affiliated with any political organizations or people. I just want freedom for the people of Iran. I want them to choose from a list of people that they want to have elections and they choose who gets to run the country. And also for it not to be a theocracy, they need to have a secular country and government.
I'm guessing the government mismanagement issue is also part of the attitude of the government towards the people, right?
Yeah, as in they don't care about their people?
Yeah, they don't listen. They have water, so who cares about the other people?
Exactly. The point I made about the disparity between the haves and the have-nots is great in Iran. It's vast, and it's only gotten worse. So
you said earlier that you were stopped by the morality police. What happened there? Do you want to share?
It's two times in my core memory. One was I was 9 years old, and I was that's the age you're supposed to start wearing a headscarf in Iran. And I had family that took us to an amusement park, and I just remember it was one or two police officers approached us and asked why I wasn't covered. I have to always mention this, that I was pretty tall for my age all the time, so I probably looked older than I was anyway. They had some words with my family, and my family kept explaining, well, she's American, she's actually 8, she's not even 9 years old yet, and she's just visiting, she doesn't know, et cetera, et cetera. And they said, well, she should cover next time she comes out. So that was, they left us alone. The second time I was in my late 20s in Iran, and I was just, my sister and two of my cousins, one of them was male, were walking back to their home in the evening, and we were laughing. We were, it was a street that didn't have a lot of traffic on it. There's nobody out actually, because it was like around 11 o'clock, I would say, during the week. So it's pretty quiet and residential area. And we're walking back, and we're laughing. Our headscarves probably fell back a little bit because we were just, having a good time singing in the streets. And then this police car rolled up and kind of blocked our path. Two officers got out and where are you? Where are you going? Who are you? How do you guys know each other? How are you related? We had to show our national ID cards, which are called carte melli. And thankfully I was with my cousins from my dad's side. So our last names are the same. So it's like, oh, we're actually family and related. And, they're like, your headscarves are falling and why are you dressed like that? And why were you out this late and all this kind of stuff. And he explained again, these are my cousins from America. Sorry. So we kind of got let go because of that. And, that's like a sadness I've always felt, is that I was able to go free just because of where I'm from. And the people that live there don't have that luxury.
What were they trying to accomplish? Were they saying that there's women who are laughing out loud and have to be put down, or what's the...
I mean, I will say when I've gone out to eat in Iran before, this doesn't happen every time, but it has happened to where if I do laugh really, I have a loud laugh. I recall joking and laughing really loud and people kind of being like, like it's like not appropriate, or I just feel it's always a way to control women. That's all it is. It's a way to silence us. It's like you have to be a certain way, you have to act a certain way, you have to be subservient. And these are people that, this is not every Iranian that feels this way. These are people that, either work for the government. And yes, there are people in society that are that conservative and feel that way. Yes, of course. But again, there's a majority of Iranians that understand too, like this was not our culture. This is not how, we come from thousands of years of history of the Persian Empire. We are not this that we have right now. This was taken over. And there was actually this really powerful picture that came out from the protest last week. And it was just this whole group of police officers, and they were staring down a whole group of protesters. And it said Islamic Republic of Iran, but it had the of X'd out, and it said Islamic Republic versus Iran. And that's how we feel. They don't represent us and our culture and our history. They represent their own manipulated version of a religion to rule over people and control them.
So how can people who are watching this or listening to this, how can they help?
I would encourage everybody to follow accounts of Iranians and Iranian Americans and other Iranians in other diaspora countries that are doing the work to get the word out, journalists, activists, and reshare, retweet, repost, draw attention to it. Don't let it die down. Use the appropriate hashtags. There's a national day of action. It's a call to action for Iran. International, I'm sorry. It's this Saturday, October 1st. So there are protests being planned all over the world. So I recommend you finding where that protest is going to be in the nearest city and go lend your support and post about it. You can call your elected officials and representatives and ask them to put pressure on the Iranian government, because a lot of elected officials have not made any statements about this situation. I personally have a problem with the people that run my city in LA, Garcetti and Newsom, who they preside over the city that has the largest concentration of Iranians outside of Iran. They have yet to make a statement in 12 days. So you can do that. And there is a Amnesty International petition, I believe, that's going around to organize an international body to investigate the human rights abuses and put pressure on the Iranian government. And
you on social media are also amplifying the signal. Where can people find you online?
So my Instagram is I am Nazanin Noor, Nazaninnour. And my Twitter is also just my first and last name, Nazanin Noor. So I am constantly updating. I post things that people send me from Iran. I post updates from journalists, just amplify all the voices from Iran and from those that are actually supporting the movement.
Well, thanks for coming on the podcast and YouTube channel. I cannot comprehend the bravery and the courage of the protesters. I mean, call them protesters. They're almost soldiers, right? Unarmed soldiers against an armed government, just throwing themselves as a collective brings a tear to my eye, just sacrificing yourself for your neighbors and your children and your country, and that kind of what I believe to be true patriotism. I can't even tell you how much respect I have for these individuals. Yeah.
I appreciate your respect for them and your solidarity with the Iranian people.